Medical events happen at a rate of about 1 in every 40 flights.
In our trip, we had 2 of them.
The first event happened when we were on our way back, actually. Actually, both of them happened on our way back from our visit to Africa.
The first one from Morocco to the US, right? And then the second one was the US to
St. Lucia. Yeah. So we had left Gambia. We had gone to Morocco. If you haven't seen those trips, they will be linked in the description box below. So the first event occurred on our way from Morocco to the US. There was some disturbance. You saw.
Yeah, so I had an aisle seat. Katie was sleeping on me. I just heard this little boy, Mommy, are you okay? Mommy, are you okay? And then it just kept getting more and more. And then
he was scared.
The more he was saying it, like he could hear more how frantic he was. And so the person in front of me was like, hey, she needs water. So I'm like, Ibrahim, we need to get water. And then I feel like you started getting water, and I'm like, wait, you know what? You should probably just go
and check out, yeah.
Because even though I was on the aisle seat, I had like the sleeping baby, and I didn't want to get up. So I was like, Ibrahim, I think you should go.
Yeah. So by that time, there was an air hostess that passed by. So one of the air hostesses came. So I came out of my seat and I told her that I was a doctor. How could I help? And she left me with the passenger, and I guess she went to go and get help and get some kits and stuff. The person that was flying with the passenger was like a 9-year-old son, 8 or 9 years old, and he was absolutely frantic and
very
panicking.
Scared.
And of course, couldn't really get much information from him. And so this lady is literally just sitting in her seat and she's not responding. So I just checked her out, felt for a pulse. She was still breathing. And then when she opened her eyes, she would just have a blank stare and she was not responding. Verbally, non-verbally, she wasn't responding at all. So I started trying to revive her. That's when the other air hostess came in, which it seemed like she was the most senior or the one in charge. And so she just tore down the aisle and she was like, "Sir, get back to your seat." I was like, okay. So I went back to my seat.
And I remember I told him, don't worry, you'll be back.
So I went back to my seat, and so they started trying to revive her, right?
I think they got her juice, they got her water.
So they got water with sugar or juice, I can't remember which.
They
were trying to give her some, get her to drink it. But she was not responsive. So they were trying to revive her. They got a medical kit, and so they had like 2 or 3 air hostesses just trying to get her to rouse.
I think they were taking her vitals.
They were taking her vitals and trying to. I think you suggested to one of them to get a blood sugar kit.
I think they said they didn't have one.
They didn't have. So I think they did have. Somebody went to get it because they did give us what her blood sugar was afterwards. Yeah. So then the first air hostess that was around, she came back and then she realized that I wasn't there. So she went ahead and told her superior that, hey, we actually have a doctor on board. I found that was strange because usually in all the videos that I've seen and when it happens on TV, there's always this announcement that the air hostesses make, like, is there a doctor on board? But they didn't do that. They didn't ask. And it was a fairly big flight.
I do feel like they looked like they knew. I don't want to say like they knew what they were doing, but it kind of looked like
they were going through some procedures first.
Like vital signs and trying to revive her and everything like that. So they kind of look like they had. And I was actually watching a TikTok. Was it a TikTok? I can't remember what I was watching, but I saw something that said that in-flight attendants are actually trained
to deal with
be
certain
first aid responders or something like that. So they had an idea
going
what they were
through something.
But I think what happened was that everybody was very frantic.
Yes, they were.
Because the little boy, her son was getting louder and louder. Mommy, are you okay?
The woman was unresponsive.
And she just was not responsive. So everybody was kind of in like okay, what is going on? You know, that kind of thing.
So after the other air hostess came and alerted her colleagues that, hey, there's a doctor on board, and she pointed, because they were speaking French, because that was the other thing. There was a bit of a language barrier as well. But I heard them distinctly mention doctor in French, and then they pointed, and so they came over and they were like, hey, can you assist us? So I went back to her. By this time they had already gotten some vitals, blood sugars, and everything was normal and she was fine. So I started trying to apply some pressure points and just try and revive her. And slowly she began to become responsive. First, she was responsive non-verbally. So she was opening her eyes, she was looking around, but she wasn't speaking at all. So continued, trying to just revive her, check her out, and then she started to speak. She eventually revealed that she actually suffers from panic attacks frequently, and she actually has an anxiety issue for which she's actually on medication. But I still went ahead and did like a mini physical exam because you still have to make sure that it was not a transient ischemic event or something neurological or something of the sort. So I was worried that maybe she had a stroke or something. She was not hypertensive, not diabetic. Her blood pressure was okay. She didn't have any deficits, any weakness or anything. Her pupils were okay and fine. And then she was okay. She was fully conscious, and she was not disoriented at all. She was able to respond to her name. She knew her son's name and everything, and she was fine. The whole thing took like 5 minutes.
More than 5 minutes.
Yeah,
maybe
about
like
7 minutes thereabout.
7 to 10 minutes, I would say.
Yeah, between the entire commotion to her coming round.
No, were you scared though?
The first instance when it had happened and the boy was screaming and the passenger in front of us was asking, "Is there a doctor?" asking for water. And I looked over and I just saw her, a little bit lolled to the side. I was like, the first thing that occurred to me was like, oh man, we might need to make an emergency landing. That was the first thing I thought. Because this was our 8-hour flight to New York. I think we had gotten over the Atlantic already. So we were not in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but we were, we were over the Atlantic already.
No, we had just taken off.
It was 10-15 minutes, but we were approaching one of those little islands off the shore of Morocco, because when I came back,
So we were not in the middle of the Atlantic.
No, we were not in the middle of the Atlantic, but we were. So I was thinking, we might have to make an emergency landing. So that was on my mind.
Which I feel like was scary because as a doctor, I would imagine that they would use your opinion to determine whether they would have to stop the flight or not.
Yeah, well, eventually the captain is the one that makes the decision.
But if a doctor is there saying, hey, this patient is critical and you need to,
apparently the only people that have the authority to redirect the flight.
We have the authority. I'm just saying that whatever opinion you give, it's gonna, because for example, if you say you're a doctor and you say, hey, I think we should turn back, and this is life threatening, and they don't listen, and something happens, then they're definitely exactly. So I know we don't have the authority to stop the flight, but I do feel like the opinion that you give can lead to whether that decision
which was
is
interesting, because from the onset, I was always thinking about that. Is this something that maybe might require us to make an emergency landing? Is she having a stroke? And all of those things were going through my mind. But I felt like after she came around and she was fine and everything, I thought that perhaps that would have been a question that maybe they would have come and asked. But they didn't, and I thought that was interesting. Given that this was an 8-hour flight and we were going to be flying over there, it was a transatlantic flight. I thought, okay, if something repeated in the next 2 hours, 3 hours, then we're going to be in a much worse position to actually make some emergency landing or something.
But she did have like a 100% recovery, so
yeah, she was okay. But we did ask the flight attendants to just keep an eye on her for the rest of the trip, especially when we were landing at JFK. Like, I was watching her. I suspected that also that during the takeoff, I'm not sure if it was pressure changes or she became anxious and all of those things, and that precipitated the event. But yeah, that could have been a factor.
By the way, if you're new here, hi, welcome. Subscribe if you're new. My name is Linnell. I'm a general practitioner, and Ibrahim here, my husband, is also a general practitioner. So the second event happened when we were flying from
New York to
St. Lucia. So when I was looking up front, I noticed that quite a few people were gathering two seats ahead of us. So I saw a few flight attendants. I saw I think the other two people were getting off from their seats
Yeah,
and making
they were
space for
coming
the
off.
flight attendants, and just a lot of activity was going on. I think I also saw one or two flight attendants going and coming back, going and coming back. So
Bustling of activity.
I was like, hey, I'm a doctor. Do you guys need help? Flight attendant came over. They're like, oh, are you a doctor? And I'm like, yes, I am. In fact, we both are, because he was on that side. And then she's like, do you mind if you show me some ID? I was like, sure, no problem. And I showed them my ID from the Medical and Dental Council here, which stated that I'm a doctor and that I'm a general practitioner. And then she's like, okay, we would love it if you would assist us. So I went over. I had this middle-aged female as well, who had been complaining of feeling weak and dizzy and just
I think she was
unwell.
generally unwell.
She was just feeling unwell. She was feeling weak. She was feeling dizzy. So I went over. I introduced myself. I told her my name. I told her that I was a general practitioner. I told her where I worked, because we had like a conversation. I guess we'll get into that a little afterwards about, like, what do you do in those situations as a doctor. So I introduced myself, my name, where I worked, in what capacity I worked, and then I asked her, a few questions: what was wrong, what she was feeling, what her symptoms were, what past medical conditions that she had. And then they brought over some minor equipment. I think they brought a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope. I don't think they could have measured her blood sugar.
No, I don't think so.
In fact, I remember at first she wasn't. At first they were saying she's diabetic, but when I spoke to her, she was not diabetic. So I got some medical information. I did a quick physical examination, and all her vital signs were within normal range, and she was already starting to feel better.
They give her something to eat.
They got her something sweet, some juice, and then she was already feeling much better. I can't remember at what point in time in the flight that was.
That was later on. It was like 20 minutes before landing.
Yeah, we were close to landing.
It was about 20 minutes or less.
I think she did mention that she hadn't eaten, like she didn't have breakfast or she didn't have lunch or whatever the case is. So I figured it was probably just a little bit of hypoglycemia going on. So we didn't do much. Her blood pressure was fine. All her vital signs were within normal range, except her blood sugar. We could not check that because he did not have a glucometer to measure her blood sugar. But she started feeling much better. She did mention that she had like a cardiac pathology.
She had some heart issues.
She had some heart issues, and one of her symptoms were palpitations. So she did feel like her heart was racing.
So she had to.
We recommended that she go to the hospital
when we landed.
But
it was like 20-15 minutes before. Because just either while you were attending to her or just after you came, they made an announcement to buckle up, and then we were landing.
Yeah, it wasn't close to landing. After we dealt with that, I remember the air hostess. She came in. She had me fill out a form. She had me fill out like what the vital signs were, because I had to manually take the blood pressure.
This was JetBlue.
This was JetBlue. She had me manually fill out the vital signs and what signs and symptoms that the lady had. She said it was for... I got the impression that they were going to be in conversation with a doctor that was not on the plane. And so she wanted that information so she could relay to whoever that person was. And I had to sign it and just identify myself. And then that was it. And then I went back to my seat. I think I went to check on her maybe once or twice afterwards, just to make sure that she was in fact doing better.
When we landed.
And then when we landed, I saw her again on the line. So I asked her how she was doing. She was fine. And then the air hostess came to me. She was like, hey, thank you for assisting. Do you guys want anything? Do you want like wine? And I remember, because you remember I was telling you how that same air hostess, I felt like she was not very pleasant to me. Because I think I had asked
we had asked for water or something for the kids.
But I wanted like how they pass and they give you like just drinks and they just give you a glass of water. I didn't want just a glass of water. I wanted like 4 glasses of water, because it was me, you, and she was kind of like... And then she came back and she was like, hey, do you guys need anything? Do you want some wine? Yes, the demeanor definitely changed. She was like, do you want some wine? Do you want some juice? Do you want... And he was like, no, thank you, because we had a conversation about if you had accepted payments or something like that, they were more legal implications. I was like, no, thank you.
What do you actually do if something like that happens to you? Whether you're a doctor or you're not,
If you're not a doctor, you don't do anything.
No, if you're
You mean a
not
medical personnel?
if you're not a medical personnel, you don't necessarily have to be a doctor or a nurse. Maybe you're just somebody that has some knowledge of CPR
Or
or
first
basic
aid or
first aid,
something.
and you want to render assistance. There are laws, international laws that can protect you. I think it's called the Good Samaritan law or something like that. When you render assistance, except if like you do something that's outright blatantly harmful, like I don't know, stab somebody. But except if you do something outrightly harmful to the patient, if all you're doing is just trying to assist, then you're protected. Except if the airline, because that happens sometimes with some airlines. It didn't happen for us, except for that air hostess that came to try, that asked if we wanted anything else. But apart from that, it didn't happen. They didn't reach out to offer credit, because sometimes airlines will do that. They might reach out to offer you credit.
But then again, I don't
and
feel
things
like it
that.
was like a major medical
Yeah,
emergency because
yeah.
the patient ended up being fine.
Yeah, that second
I
one
feel like
was
they would
more
have
just
done
like an
fine.
event.
They would have done fine if we were there or not. So I don't feel like they would have
Agreed.
felt like they needed to repay us or anything like that.
But if you do accept payment, if you do accept any gift, then that counts as payment. So in the future, if
And
later
then
on
there
there
are
is some
legal-
any
there
legal
can be
issues,
illegal.
then that they can have legal implications. But if you don't accept any gifts, then you just acting under the Good Samaritan law and you're covered. So if there is any litigation for any litigation issues, because that's in the world today, that's one thing most people are concerned about, more so in the medical field. Like, if I help, will it come back to me? Can somebody sue me for XYZ? And as long as you don't accept any gifts or favors based on that, then usually you're well covered and you're well protected. It was very interesting. The first one was scary. It was scary.
Well, I didn't really participate in the first one.
The first one was
happily in my
it was
seat
scary.
with a sleeping baby
It was scary. It was
because of how unresponsive she was.
because she was unresponsive. She was quite unresponsive for a little while. Her eyes were closed. It was only when I started applying some pressure points on her face, that's when her eyes opened, but she still just had a blank stare. And only later on she became verbally responsive. And then it didn't help that people around were getting, of course, noticeably, agitated and worried and all of those things. So
Yeah, mine, I wouldn't even call it a medical emergency.
it's an event.
It was
It's
an
medical
event, yeah.
yeah.
But it was pretty cool. I feel like that was our first experience as doctors in, like, not cool, but you know what I mean, like.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was interesting, like, being in, like, that kind of situation. What do you think of us offering to help? As in, do you think we should have, like, just lay low-key until maybe they asked? Or do you think it was good that we offered our assistance?
I think it depends. Like the second one you said, like whether we were there or not there, they probably might have handled it. But for the first one, I think it was good that, but it wasn't even the air hostesses. Like on both occasions, it's not like there was an announcement on the plane. Like I'm sure there were people on the flight who didn't even have any idea what went on, because it's not like they came. It could have also been that there was maybe other medical personnel on the flight.
I for one, I would not be able to sit down and see like a medical emergency going on and just not say anything.
So usually if it's something
and like
that
just like
if it's something that happens and it's announced or there are other personnel, so the procedure is usually like when you go, like you said, you introduce yourself to the personnel around, even if it is other medical staff. So if it's a nurse, if it's other doctors, you want to introduce yourself and your area of expertise, because it's possible that whilst you could be a doctor, it's possible you could be, I don't know, maybe a radiologist or an ophthalmologist.
No shame, no hate.
It's just that you deal with a different branch of medicine. And then it's possible that maybe the nurse that's there is an ICU nurse that's more trained or more used to dealing with emergency type situations than you are. And so that has happened. I've actually heard stories of that happening to persons, actually interns. It happened like to an intern. An intern is like somebody that graduated their first year. They're still in their first year after practice, and then they were on a flight or and in a place, and there was an emergency. But the other person was a consultant, but they've been many years out of like general practice. They've been like focused. I think they were radiologists or ophthalmologists, and so they were like, go ahead, I'll just take the back seat, because that happens. Hierarchy begins to form when you have multiple medical personnel. So the one that's more experienced with dealing with the situation usually takes the forefront, and the others just support as needed. So yeah, if you're watching this and you have had something similar happen to you, whether you had to assist or not, and it was something that happened while you were on air in flight, just let us know down in the comments. It was so interesting. When the second one was happening and I was seeing this commotion, what was the first thing that dropped in my mind? It was not even medical emergency. I thought, oh, what if there's a bomb? Like, what are the odds? Like, this happened after, and then like there was nothing, like there was no frantic. Everybody was quiet, but they were just leaving the area, and I wasn't seeing that there was somebody there. I just saw the people get up and they go, and then the air hostess people came, they look, they go. So I was wondering, what's going on?
Anyways, guys, adventures of the life of two doctors. Eh?
But anyways.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. And I guess we'll see you in the next one.
Indeed.
Bye.
Stay safe.